Hello again, this is Erica from Therapeutic Health Services, and I'm going to talk with you guys about post-acute withdrawal symptoms. Post-acute withdrawal symptoms. So these are something that not everyone is going to experience in early recovery, but almost everyone will, unfortunately. Some people are going to feel them a little bit more intensely than others, and some people are going to have very mild. So what are post-acute withdrawal symptoms? Post-acute withdrawal symptoms are what happens after the physical effects of the drugs have left your body. So if we look at opiate addiction, when you're coming down from opiates and you go through the withdrawal period, you have that time where your body, you're sweating, your bones hurt, you are throwing up, you're nauseous, you can't sleep, hot, cold chills. If you're drinking, that's where the tremors, sometimes people have hallucinations. This is when that part is over, and it's really where you kind of start your transition period into sobriety. And so they look a little bit, you kind of feel like you're going crazy. And what happens with post-acute withdrawals is you usually have intense cravings. There's also people that have a lot of using dreams. And when I say using dreams, I mean vivid dreams, where some people will wake up thinking, oh my God, did I use? They might wake up feeling like they're high. There's also sensitivity to stress and what I like to call moodiness. So their moods are kind of up, down, all over the place. Some people may feel really angry, and some people may want to completely just break down and cry. There is no rhyme. Oh, and then they have these other weird things where sometimes your balance is off. It's really bizarre. But it's basically your brain healing. And so I need to kind of explain to you why that happens. The disease model of addiction. Your brain is affected when you use drugs. And what's happening is PAWS is trying to basically tell your brain it's time to use again. And that's where you get these things. So I'm going to show you guys how that happens. So the very first thing I need to do is do not make fun of my brain. But let's say this is your brain. And I know no human brain looks like this. So you have this part of your brain. And inside you have this lovely little midbrain. That's your midbrain. I like to call it your caveman brain, but we'll call it your midbrain. So the midbrain then has, and this looks extraordinarily inappropriate, but it has this thing right down here. This right here is your amygdala. Your amygdala is responsible for memory, it's responsible for smell, it's responsible for recognizing fear. So when we look at your amygdala, and I am more than likely going to spell this incorrectly, and usually this is where the people in my audience, my patients, my clients will correct me and tell me I spelled it wrong. So scream at your camera, at your computer that I did it. So there's amygdala, and it is responsible for your smell, your memory, recognizing fear. That's the amygdala. The other side of that, which looks inappropriate, and I know what it looks like, is called your VTA. So with your VTA, it is almost like a dopamine warehouse. So we're given a certain amount of dopamine each day. So I'm going to use this blob down here. We're going to make this our brain. So let's say that the purple is our dopamine. So let's say we're given 5 dopamine a day. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, of course, our brain gives us so much more, but let's say we get 5 of these lovely little dopamines a day. So these are our dopamines. This is what we get. We get 5 of them. Now, there are certain things that we can do throughout our day that's going to make us have a little bit extra. And it comes from this part. It comes from that dopamine warehouse. So if I walk down Madison and I smell Mad Pizza and all I think about is, oh my God, that smells amazing. I've just released a little bit of dopamine because it gives me pleasure, because my amygdala recognizes the smell. It triggers the memory of how amazing that pizza was, and it releases a little bit of dopamine into me. The other thing that happens when we can be smells, the other thing can be our memories. I always like to think of like my son before he became a monster and a toddler, is he used to come up and want to love me and hug me and kiss on me, and now he just spits at the dog. But before, when he was little chubby guy, he'd come up, and the very first time he came up and he said, "Mommy, I love you." Oh, I just got a little bit of dopamine thinking about that, because it makes us feel good. So it releases into it. When we use drugs, we basically get a sense of numbing, a sense of relief, and we get an intense sense of pleasure. And that comes from that mid part of our brain where we just get it. And that dopamine warehouse right there releases it. So let's say I get 5. Now, of course, I'm not going to be able to do it how it does it. But let's say we use drugs. All of a sudden I'm used to 5. Now I'm doing this to my brain. I'm just releasing it. I use drugs, and when I say drugs, like let's say I don't want to get anyone to trigger, but let's say I use crack, or I use smoke heroin, or I inject. I basically give my brain all of this right here. I'm just filling it up. And the thing about our brain is that we remember. And so you'll be able to see here, I know, bear with me, it's kind of a pain in the butt, I'm sorry. So what we have here is now I have just released all of this dopamine into my system. And of course, when we're talking about it with our brain, it's like in the millions. So I'm gonna kind of pick it up here, I'm gonna show you guys. So it kind of looks like this. I have all of this dopamine. Now, this is not dopamine that's sustainable. I only get 5. So what happens is that high wears off. It's either the next day, the next hour, the next minute in some cases. And so what happens is, and you'll see it, is it leaves little indents right here. I'm pulling it all out. Sorry, guys. And this looks gross. But if you look at this, my dopamine is kind of on the table. But if you look at my brain, right here, it still looks like dopamine. It still looks like there's still holes in there. It's still there. And so when I only have 5 in there, but my brain is used to this, and let's say I use this way consistently for 10, 25, even 5 years, even 2 years, all of a sudden my brain remembers that's what's going on. And so when we have PAWS, basically our dopamine, we're only getting 5. And so our brain is literally basically going like, where is the rest of it? And our brain is basically pissed off at us. So your brain is now trying to be able to function with just the 5. But what's happened is we've become accustomed to all of it. And so whenever we change things, we have a reaction. And that's why we start to have using dreams. That's why what we start to do is we start to feel extremely tired. That's why we then are all moody and all over the place, because we're trying to adjust to life without the neurotransmitters that we've become accustomed to. Then it becomes, we can't feel joy. We can't feel joy, we can't feel happiness, we can't feel content, because our brain is literally like, what'd you do to me? So here's the good news with this. is that this is totally healable. And I really want you guys to think about PAWS. I'm going to backtrack a little bit. So my grandmother's amazing. She's awesome. And one of the things that she used to do when I would get a cut when I was a kid, because I was always falling down, is she would have me come in and she would take hydrogen peroxide and she put it on the cut and it'd bubble up. And it was my favorite thing to see it bubble up, and I don't know why. So then she'd pat it dry and then she'd put the Neosporin in the Band-Aid. And my favorite part was that bubbling. I don't know why. So 2 or 3 days later, that same cut would be extraordinarily itchy. It would be so itchy and I just want to scratch at it. But if I did that, I would reinfect. And so if you kind of think about your brain, what's happened is we sort of poured, when we got you detox, we sort of poured some hydrogen peroxide on your brain, it bubbled up, and now your brain is like, oh, okay, it's getting rid of it, you're starting to feel good, and then all of a sudden the healing begins. And that means you're not numb anymore. That means you have to start dealing with life on life's terms, and you just want to scratch at your brain. Your brain is starting to heal. You're starting to come back alive again. It's painful and it's itchy and it's uncomfortable, but that's kind of what PAWS is it really wants you to scratch it. So we don't want you to scratch it. The brain is amazing. It can heal. So we have to start to get used to, oh my God, it's so gross, you guys. So we have to start to get used to life without this. So we can actually undo some of the stuff that happens. So I'm going to show you on the board and then I'll show you on our brain again. Ugh, it's gross. Is we have this part of our brain right here. And this part of our brain is the frontal lobe. The frontal lobe is what causes us to have choices and decisions. And so this whole thing, so how we learn through stuff is there's this thing called a pleasure pathway. And the pleasure pathway goes up through here, kind of through there. I went outside the brain, but you all will forgive me. So basically what happens is we start to remember things. And when we get into addiction, we start to kind of firm this path on there where I feel uncomfortable, I'm going to go ahead and use. I feel angry, I'm going to go ahead and use. So that becomes the choice. That becomes what we're used to. And so when we then start to try to get out of that path, what we have to do is we have to start to find a new path. We have to start to find a new way. And it's very ingrained in us, this particular path. And so what we try to do is we try to find a different way and just going maybe this way instead. You may be going that way, but we have to continually practice it. And that's what post-acute withdrawals does, is it's uncomfortable. But what the brain does, okay, this is gonna get gross. So if we readjust this part of it, I've got good and plenties all over me now. So what we do is, oh, there's one stuck in there. So what we do is our brain will start to heal, and eventually those holes will start to go away, and we'll start to be able to, and every time we practice a new way, every time we start to practice a new path, that initial I might as well use, or those using dreams, or that moodiness, it all starts to stabilize out. But here's the risk, and if you can kind of see it in here, you'll see that it's still pink. And that's part of the disease of addiction, is that just because it starts to go away, it doesn't mean that it's not always there. And that's where the risk comes in of once you start to use with those PAWS, it's almost like your brain all of a sudden says, ooh, I remember this. And it comes right back on through. And look, I've got some still stuck in here. I didn't get them out. And you reactivate that. Oh God, I have more in here. You reactivate that. And all of a sudden, your brain is like, I remember this. And that new path that you were trying to forge, it gets forgotten and you go back to what's comfortable. And so post-acute withdrawals, there's no easy answer to them other than it takes daily diligence, where you have to actively practice being mindful, being present, doing things the right way even though no one is looking, being able to be uncomfortable, being able to manage the highs and lows without drug use. Because the more you go without escaping, without numbing yourself out, you then start to realize and connect with it. And when you're dealing with opiates, so opiates have this lovely little thing called endorphins, and endorphins are what causes us to not feel pain. So if any of you guys have noticed that you've become a little bit more sensitive to pain, either emotional and physical, it's the same concept. I'm gonna try to do this faster. Is your body got used to all of this lovely endorphins and you take it away, and now all you have to do is use this many endorphins too, when all you're used to is a bunch. Your brain still has them in there. And so you're gonna feel things more intensely. Someone could touch you and you could be like, ah, that's real. The thing about PAWS is a lot of people think that they're going crazy, and you're not. It's your brain is reacting, your brain is healing, and we start to have to deal with things the way we're supposed to. So the best ways to do it are to practice self-care, and I know it sounds like a lot of work, but it's about exercising, eating right, getting yourself on a sleep schedule, doing small things, not being on your phone 24/7, not watching movies at night, being able to go really back to basics. I am going to go to bed at this time, I'm gonna wake up at this time. Instead of taking the bus down through the Blade, I'm gonna get off here, take the light rail, skip. Being able to really start to understand who you are without substances, and being able to really practice new patterns. Because if you do the same old stuff, if you talk to the same old people, if you talk the same old way, if you still decide to hang out with people that are using, you're keeping that part of your brain active, and you have to retrace your new pattern. You have to be able to find a new way to do it. So how to cope with PAWS. So there's a couple things that you can do, and I'm gonna go over 10. I have a cheat sheet here that I'm gonna go off of, but one of the very first things that you can do is you can go to treatment. Like, go to treatment, because the thing about PAWS is a lot of times you feel like you're crazy. And if you get into a treatment environment with someone who says, you're not crazy, you're going through PAWS, like of course you're gonna be moody, and you can find a way to connect with other people who've gone through with what you have gone through with your group members and individual sessions, and just talking about it. It takes away that power. So going to treatment, it also creates a schedule, it also creates a set of expectations, and it causes us to have to set a bar. You know, for so long we stayed at this place. And so a lot of times we forget that we are powerful, that we do have choices, we do have the ability to be great. So going to treatment, being good to yourself, so practicing that self-care, eating good food. I know that when you very, very first get off of drugs, whether it's opiates or whatever, we all kind of want to be carby Barbies. We want to eat food and bread and sugar and everything, but that just causes to have our mood swings go broop, and then we crash down. We don't want to put ourselves full of energy drinks or sodas, or we just want us to try to have healthy food, healthy choices, things that are gonna help us stabilize, because we've already been living in chaos so much. We don't need to add the sugar, caffeine, chaos to our brains as well. Talk about what you're experiencing. It takes away the power. Tell people what's going on. Tell someone, I had a using dream. It was so vivid. Because a lot of times we'll feel guilty, like, oh, if I'm having this dream, that means I'm not serious. That is not the case. Your brain is literally trying to figure out a way to get you to get that dopamine, so it comes a knock-in. And that's nothing that you have any control over. Not talking about it is what you can do. That's what helps get you through it. I know, I'm going to say this and everyone's going to be like, what ifs? A journal. Being able to talk about a journal, journaling what's going on, finding another way. Some people are verbal, some people are writers, some people are artistic, but getting your feelings out. One of the hardest, most difficult, underrated things that happen when you're getting clean and sober is you have to start dealing with your F words, which are your feelings. And you're gonna have them. You're gonna be angry, you're gonna be scared, you're gonna be guilty, you're gonna be all kinds of stuff. Get it out, whether it's through a journal, whether it's through a video journal, or just get it out. So journaling, it is helpful. Meditation, and meditation is very hard. So YouTube has a lot of guided meditations. They have a lot of places that can help you kind of start that, because meditation is a skill. It's kind of like learning how to do anything. You're not going to be perfect at it the first time. It takes practice, but meditation, it really helps you stay present on what you can do and stay in that moment. One of the things about PAWS is it causes you to kind of loop back to that those negative beliefs about yourself. And so when you talk about it, it interrupts that cycle, because one of the things that happens in addiction is the outcome is almost always, well, then I can use. Whether or not it's F it, I can use, whether it's I have an excuse to use, is we want to interrupt that cycle. And so talking about it is one way to interrupt that cycle. That's what we want to do, because the end result does not come back to, well, I guess I might as well use. It has to be, I can make a better choice. We want to get out of our midbrain and into our frontal lobe. You know, and I always use the joke, but you know, the difference between the midbrain and the frontal lobe is I come down in a dress that makes me look horrible, and I ask my husband, how do I look? And do I look fat in this? And the midbrain would say, hell yeah, take that off. But the frontal lobe says, you look amazing. That's that frontal lobe, is being able to make choices when your initial reaction is this. So interrupting that cycle, practicing it is important. One of the big things with post-acute withdrawals is memory problems. Write it down. Write it down. Don't use your phone. Our phones have become our everything. So we get a ton of reminders on our phone. And when I get a reminder on my phone, I scroll right on past it, because I have reminders for the weather, I have reminders for work, I have reminders for my kids' dental appointments, and I scroll past them. Write it down. Be mindful, be present, write it down. Old school way. Insomnia, sleeping, practice those sleeping patterns. It's what it is. It's practicing. You might not go to bed right away. You might not go to sleep right away. But if your body is in a state of rest, it's eventually going to do it. And the other part of this with the PAWS is you have to keep telling yourself, this is going to get better. So those are the 10. It's going to get better. So PAWS are a very real part of early recovery, and we have to figure out a way to cope with them. And so you can do this. You got this. We can figure it out, and you're not crazy. So thank you, guys.